Welcome to Inner Niña Podcast, embracing your inner child while leading with strength. This is a space for Latina women and beyond who are ready to break generational cycles and lead from a place of wholeness. Together, we will reconnect with the little girl inside, the one who dreamed big, felt deeply, and longed to be seen, and honor her as we step in fully into our power. Join me, Maria Benitez, for heartfelt reflections and empowering conversations about identity, healing, culture, and leadership. Each episode invites you to embrace your inner niña while leading with authenticity, compassion, and courage. Welcome back to Inner Niña. Today is with great honor that I introduce this very special guest, Ms. Bettie Baca. Bettie Baca had a long career in politics, government, education, and community service. She worked at the highest levels of government, at the Finance Institution of Higher Education, and as Director of Congressional Caucus. As a daughter of the Chicano Movement, early in her career, Bettie worked to organize Latinos in Kansas, Texas, and nationwide. In 1974, she founded MANA as the Mexican-American Women's National Association, which later became MANA, a National Latina Organization. Bettie is our pioneer and the strong shoulders that we Latinas like me stand on today. She helped pave the way for us and for the new generations. Welcome, Bettie. Thank you so much for joining us today and being part of our Inner Niña journey. How are you today?
Wonderful, Maria. I'm so happy to be with you. I just can't tell you how proud I am of you for this podcast series, and I hope that it reaches a lot of people.
I appreciate that. Fun fact, she is the co-founder of the organization that I proudly represent and gave way to the platform that was created out of me being part of this organization. She's someone I look up to and someone that I aspire to be. And I'm hoping that I'm kind of representing her legacy by introducing the wonderful work that the organization, MANA, a National Latina Organization, does. I'm actually part of the national board, been an active member now for almost more than 5 years. I started at MANA de San Diego. And as I kept learning, I'm like, that's it. This is it for me. It's a passion of mine because you see the wonderful things that the organization does. And it all started with this lady on this side of my screen. So I want her to tell her story, her journey, and how she started MANA back in the 70s. So walk us through that.
Well, a lot happened before we started MANA 52 years ago. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. My inner niña was a feisty little Chicana born nearly 83 years ago on the plains of northern Colorado. My family consisted of my mother and my father and two older sisters. They were working the beet fields in northern Colorado, the sugar beet fields. And my sisters were both born on little shacks on the fields. I was the only one in 1943 who was actually born in a real house, a real white house. My father always said we were working class. I kind of think we were working class poor. We moved to town, to Greeley shortly thereafter, where he took a job at the ice plant. My father was quiet. He was intelligent. He was well-read, and he only had 3 years of formal education. He was put back time and again because he only spoke Spanish in Roy, New Mexico, where he was born. But he was an activist of sorts. Would talk to us every night about the politics, about the issues of the day. In 1942, he was elected on an organizing labor committee to work for the rights of sugar beet workers. And our little town of Greeley, Colorado was really quite racist. There were two groups of people who lived there, Mexicans and whites. We called them Anglos. And a lot of the Mexican lived in the Spanish colony 2 miles out of town. We were 2 miles from there, right in town, in a small little house, a small little community. And the inner Latina at the time was quite a feisty little girl who could be seen running around the neighborhood with all the little kids following her. She was a leader at that time. And I say at that time because things changed a little bit. We'll talk about that in a little while. Talking about my father again, the quiet activist that he was, there was segregation in our town. Moreover, there was segregation in the one Catholic church. The church was built like the movie theater, with two sections, small sections on the sides, and a large middle section in the middle. And I wondered why we always sat on the sides, but we did because only the white people, the Anglos, could sit in the middle. Now, let me tell you about my mother. She was quite amazing and incredibly progressive for a Mexican woman, 19 in the early 40s. She had 3 daughters. She insisted that we all get an education, not just a high school education, which was a big deal for Chicanos in those days to get all the way through high school. No, we had to get a college education. You know why? Because she never wanted us to have to depend on a man. She was very firm about that we chart our own path. She would, she wasn't so happy when we got married. I was going to say she would be happy if we got married. She was a little possessive, but she was amazing. And I owe so much of what I did finally in Mana to my mother and to my father because he taught us our values, hardworking, don't discriminate on anybody. In those days, there was discrimination just on the Mexicans, but whenever we went to Denver, of course, there were Asians and Blacks. I actually never met a Black until I went to college. We were that isolated in northern Colorado. So my father, he taught us hardworking values, learning, being respectful, and we were Democrats. He said we were Democrats because Democrats were for the little man. And in those days, that was quite true. He was a big union supporter, as our whole family is. But going on, I did well in school, but the little girl that would run around with kids following her in the neighborhood didn't have that same experience in grade school. She learned to be quiet because of the discrimination. She was a very good student because she was very well behaved. She didn't get anything but A's all through grade school. And she and her sisters went to the college laboratory school, which is pretty special because it was a teacher's college, and they were kind of fortunate to be able to go to the lab school. But that was my mother again. She had gone to that school. She didn't graduate, but she went to college, high school. So even though they had to pay a little bit of a tuition, we did get an excellent education. There, I made friends, very good friends. But I learned later, much later, when we had 20 reunion, that the boys were not allowed to date me because I was Mexican. My cousins also went to school there, and there was only one other Mexican family that went to school there. Well, the Inner Niña was shrinking a little bit. She was learning to get along, to have people like her, and to be very well behaved. She went to college because that's what we did. It was a teacher's college, so she became a teacher. And she graduated, and although she respected the teaching profession, she didn't want to be a teacher. She wanted to be something more active. So those were the days of President Johnson's War on Poverty. So after a couple of months of being at home, the director of Head Start called me and asked if I would be a social worker. Well, I didn't know anything about being a social worker, but it means talking to people and helping them with whatever they need. So I did that for a while. And then I had an opportunity. It wasn't an opportunity, really was a decision because I was a wanderer and I wanted to do new things. I and a friend moved to South San Francisco where I tried a lot of different little things just to make a living. I had to feed myself. My parents weren't supporting me. I was supporting myself. I was a passport examiner. I worked at the Bank of America when there were no computers. I actually ran a addressograph machine. We're talking 1960s, okay? And then I did get a really good job at Hillcrest Juvenile Hall in San Mateo, South San Francisco. And I was able to work with young girls from the age of 13 to 18. It was a wonderful job and I loved it. But then I got the telephone call that would change my life. While I was in college and during the summers, my sister Polly was working as an editor for a labor union. And they would call me to go be an intern in Washington, D.C. over the summers when I was in college. And when I went to D.C., it was the first time I didn't feel discriminated against. People treated me like I was normal, and they even thought I was pretty. But in any case, I got the call. I was working at the juvenile hall, which was great. I have to tell you, I'm going to tell you things that are pretty amazing because I had such a wonderful career. And that was because she learned how to take chances, but we'll get into that later. So the call was from the man who I had worked for in D.C., and he had started a business, and they had they got to do Vista training in El Paso. Vista was Volunteers in Service to America. It was the Domestic Peace Corps. So he wanted me to go work there to be the administrative assistant to run the office. And I said, great. And I did. And I went to El Paso. Really hadn't ever spent any time in Texas, but I ran into the Chicano movement. The director was State Senator Gonzalo Pariente, really talented man. One of the volunteers was Jane Velasquez, who she wasn't Jane Velasquez at the time, but she became Jane Velasquez when she met and married the famous Willie Velasquez of the Southwest Voter Registration Project. So we had Anglo and Mexican volunteers, and I was introduced to all of the things that were going on in South Texas, so that when the consulting firm asked me to go to another Vista program, it wasn't a training program, it was in South Texas in the Valley. It was the Vista Minority Mobilization Program. And it was the first time that the Vista program had recruited volunteers. They did get paid, but they were essentially volunteers because they didn't get paid much. But they recruited volunteers from their own homes. So there were three leaders, a man who also became quite famous and was an amazing organizer. I learned so much from him. Jose Uriegas, he was one of the leaders, and then a white fellow who could speak English and was a terrific organizer as well, and me. And we each had three volunteers from South Texas, and a lot of the Chicano activist leaders would come out of that program. So I then went back to the consulting firm in DC and did a couple of other things. They sent me and another fellow down to Miami in the late 60s to do a labor force survey of Blacks and Cubans, because the Cubans were just coming in. And so we actually did a block by block survey, and we wrote a report on the situation with Blacks and Cubans in Miami. But being from the community and being community oriented, we lived with families. And I lived with the Black family in Liberty City, which was all Black at the time. Of course, it's not now. And when Robert Kennedy got shot, there were riots, and I had to stay in the house. I was in my 20s, and so all of this was happening, but it was quite exciting, and I wasn't frightened at all. But that was very exciting. I was very involved with the Chicano movement, and that's when my inner Niña surfaced, because for the first time since I was a little kid, I really felt that I had the right to be angry, and I was angry. I hadn't suffered like a lot of people suffer, but it affected me. It made me different than what I would have otherwise been. After the work I was doing in the movement, I joined some people that you've heard of, Raul Seguirre and Rick Bella. They were working for the Migrant Council in the Office of Economic Opportunity in Washington, D.C., and I had met them because of the work I was doing with the Chicano movement. And they said, we need to start it. Consulting firms were all over the place at that time in the late 60s, early 70s. And they said, we have to start a Hispanic consulting firm. You've worked for consulting firms. Come work with us. So I did. So it was Rick and Raul and Sylvia Gonzalez, a really smart woman from Tucson, Arizona. We started this Hispanic consulting firm. We didn't have very much money. We actually used to eat bologna sandwiches. A lot of the times we didn't get paid. And when we did get paid, maybe it was a couple of $100 for a month's work. But it was amazing. And we think we did great work. And we did get some contracts. But our little office on Jefferson Street in the middle of downtown DC became the haven for all of the Chicano activists who were coming to town to lobby Congress and mostly to get money, to get support for their programs. And we would write contracts for them, and we would look at the congressional record and see what opportunities there might be for us as well, because we had to eat. But those were very lean days for all of us. Well, that's when I met Manny Fierro, this fiery Chicano activist who had from Texas and had grown up in Boys Town, and he came to us because he wanted us to help him write a proposal, because he was working with migrant women, and he wanted to start an organization that would help them. So we got to know each other. I was very impressed by his activism. And of course, that was that's what I wanted. That's what drove me in those days. And so he decided he wanted to start migrant labor council in Kansas. I don't know if he was our mutual friend, but a dear, dear friend now, Delano Avila. We called him Len Avila. He's now Magdaleno Rose Avila, who is quite famous in the Chicano movement to this day. He was heading up the Colorado Migrant Council, and it was amazing. They had money, they were doing great work. And Manny Fierro wanted to start a Kansas Migrant Council. So he asked me if I would join him, and I did. I was a risk taker. All this time, we didn't have any money. I mean, we had a little money. We got $4,000 to I'll tell you later, but to do what we were going to do next, to do the council. And that we lived on that for a couple of years. We never had any insurance. None of us. Health insurance. I don't know. That was a little foolish. I don't recommend that to our young women. Please don't do that. But I used to say, I had this attitude. I've been poor. I know how to be poor. I can do it. And I went on. So yeah. So I married him. And we went to Kansas, and within 2 years, we had organized in western Kansas, where all the agriculture area is, where no state or federal or agencies were helping them. They didn't even have a head start. But we got a contract from a small contract, a $4,000 contract, to do a study on workers in western Kansas, low-income workers. So we did. And that we organized, within 2 years, we had organized 5 councils. And we had a state convention that brought in, because I had worked in D.C., so I knew a lot of people from the Civil Rights Commission, from the Office of Economic Opportunity, from Migrant Affairs, from education. They all came into Western Kansas, and we had about 600 people, because all of our 5 councils came in to this amazing meeting. Juan Gutierrez, an activist from Texas, he did migrant training. So by the end of the convention, we had established the Kansas Council on Agricultural Workers and Low-Income Families. In the next days and months, we had a trained board of directors. We had a small staff in an office. That was still in the early 70s. And I don't know that we felt finished, but we gave the organization to the people. I don't know how long it went, but it went on for a number of years in helping people. It was just so fulfilling, an amazing thing to be able to be a part of. Manny Fierro was on to his next job. To his next, it wasn't a job, to his next thing that he wanted to do. And of course, I wanted to do it too. And we had a son by that time. And it's not the reason we left, but there was an issue with 2 girls in junior high school. They were talking Spanish. And the assistant principal took them and threw them against the wall. So they came and told us what had happened. And and they met Manny Fierro, and it was a big deal. He got fired. It was all over the papers. And when he was going to visit the family out one night, they lived out on a farm because there was a farming community. This car with a hatchback was raced past him and shot at him, and actually bullets went through the window of the car. And then he got past them, and they were chasing him again. And in those days, they used to carry guns. He did, and the movement guys did, just little pistols. He had a pistol in the car. And he said, I cannot run these guys. So he put on the brakes, and they passed him, and he shot back. He didn't hit them, but they let him go. That's not why we left Garden City, but I was sort of relieved, because I had a baby at the time. I have a cute story about that too, but I have too many stories, so I will move on. So the next thing we were going to do was to go to Topeka, the state capital. It wasn't a Hispanic lobby, a lobby for minorities. So we did that for a little while, and then we got another call from Raul and Rick and Juan Gutierrez and my sister Polly. She was a state legislator at that time. She was the first Latina state senator, by the way, in the country. That's another story too. I have a lot of stories. They called and said there was a group, I believe it's called Common Cause. It was a lobby and nonprofit and a very good organization. And they called and said, we think there should be a Hispanic lobby in Washington, D.C. They were always doing this, we think, but they didn't know anybody who had done any lobbying, and he and I had. I'm not saying that in other states they probably had lobbyists as well, but we were state lobbyists. We were registered state lobbyists. So they would you come and run the, what was it called? The Congressional Hispanic Caucus. We called it El Congreso. Okay. Well, another nonprofit, very little money, but we did that for several years and made amazing, amazing contributions. So, and we finally had to leave because there just wasn't money. It was nonprofit. It was, we did have support from labor unions and from, Latinos who had funds, but it just wasn't enough to raise a family on. And we were both working there. About that time, I was involved. You always have to be doing something. We were obviously doing a very important thing, lobbying for Chicanos on Capitol Hill. But then I met Bettie Baca. She was working for Bambi was probably the only Latina in the state capitol, in the national capital at the time. She was working for a senator. The only Latina ever had worked for a senator, and that was Walter Mondale. And I met Gloria Lopez. She was a fierce feminist. She also worked at El Congreso for a while. And we were friends. And I was also friends with Charlene Maldonado. She was a Republican, a feisty Republican from California. And she started getting Latinas together, Chicanas. We were then Chicanas, right? Because the Latinos were mostly from the 5 southwestern states, because it was early. It's not the case now, but that's what we were. And she started just calling people together to, I forgot what she called this. It wasn't Las Mujeres, it was something. I'll remember it next time we speak. But Charlene would have called all the Chicanas together. We were 10 or 12. We would go to lunch on Sundays at downtown at one of the seaside restaurants, always the same place. And we got to talking. And, I had been involved, obviously, in the Chicano movement, the other women as well. And movements were big. I mean, it was the anti-war time. We were demonstrating. We were being gassed. We were at all the demonstrations. We were active. And I was we looked around. And there was the National Women's Political Caucus. There was National Organization for Women. And I worked with them. I even helped restart the Northern Virginia National Women's Caucus with another amazing white woman. And there were also the Latino organizations. All the ones I had worked with were always led by men. And there was the National Council of La Raza, which is now Unidos US, was getting started, run by men. And we just got together because we were coming together to talk about our issues and so forth. We said, we need to start something about us, because we are the low of the lowest, in terms of if other women make 52 cents on the dollar, we make 32 cents on the dollar. We really came from activists and places and discrimination where we knew that because we could be where we were, that we were such a minority, we knew that we had to form something that would speak to our issues. The national women's organizations were good to us. The Chicano organizations needed us and respected us, but we needed our own organization. So we decided to start MANA. And I have to tell you, for me, the impetus behind that, I give her so much credit, was Gloria Lopez. The girl would never take no for an answer. She was amazing. So she and I and Charlene got together and we said, well, how are we going to start this organization? I mean, we come from the community. We're organizers. You don't just say, okay, I'm going to be the president and you're going to be, no, we started an organizing committee so that we could bring together women who would then make the decisions about who their leaders would be. We were leaders, but who their officers would be. So we said, Gloria and I went to Bambi. We said, Bambi, you have stature. You have to be the chair. She said, no, I've seen these things. I've been around. I've seen these things come and go. She said, no, I'm not going to start something that's just going to fizzle. So we said, okay, we promise you, you need to do this because you have position. People know you. You need to do this. And we promise you. And thank you, Maria, and all of you out there, Manacitas, you made it happen. We will make sure that it continues, because I have to tell you, there was the National Conference of Puerto Rican Women. Amazing women. Paquita, there were so many amazing women. But it didn't last it just hasn't lasted as a national organization that long. And there was Comisión Femenil in Southern California, and it was more local. Fantastic organization. There were women working together, coming together, doing things. So we wanted this to be a national organization that would last forever. Okay, that would work on behalf of Latinas forever. And so, but we said, you know what? It has to be a truly membership organization. It has to be, because the women have to own it. They have to run it. So unlike a lot of the organizations, because, and I'll probably speak out of turn a little bit here, out of class. They needed money, so they created organizations like the National Council La Raza, all of the organizations, and they have affiliates, but they didn't have chapters. They didn't have membership organizations like LULAC did. LULAC and the American GI Forum both were membership organizations, and LULAC really is very strong now and has chapters all over the place. And so it was so important to us to have an organization that had chapters that was governed from the bottom up. Where am I going from here, Maria? Do you have more questions for me? I'm going on and on
No,
about where I started.
I don't even want to interrupt you because I'm like, tell me more. And I just want to say that since you have so much knowledge, don't be worried that we're gonna make this into chapters. We can make this, chapter 1, because these stories need to be told. I've had a chance to hear a little bit of that when we get together, and it's just like I'm tuning in, but you're everybody gravitates towards you. So I don't get my one-on-one. I'm enjoying every minute
Well,
of this.
let me go back to, I was talking about myself, and then I got to talking about Mana, because I wasn't working for Mana, but I was working for, my husband and I had separated because we were born of the movement. Our marriage was born of the movement, and it lasted 10 years. And we were lifelong friends, but the marriage didn't last. But the love and the friendship lasted. My own husband, Alex, my current husband, became fast friends with him. And when he was ill, the boys and me, we all took care of him. And so he was a good man. He was feisty. He was amazing. But we had separated, and he made Juan Gutierrez give me a job at the National Bilingual Clearinghouse, which his friend Joel Gomez was running. So I got a job after we separated. And I was a single mother at the time, but he was a very involved father. I had 2 children by that time, 2 sons, who I used to take to all of our meetings. They were the first male members of Mana, I'm certain, because they would go and make trouble at all the meetings. Some of the books talk about them. In any case, so I went to work for the Bilingual Clearinghouse, and then um, how did this work? I got an no. I was, my sister, Bettie Baca, who had been a state legislator at the time, about 1981. She got elected as one of 2 vice chairs of the Democratic National Committee. And she said, Betty, I want you to be my assistant. And I said, well, here I go again, right? So I said, let me talk to the director of the Democratic National Committee. I'm not so sure I'm really qualified to do this. It's the Democratic National Committee. So I think his name was Gene Eisenberg. And I went to his office and I told him of my reluctance. And he said, Betty, he said, there are so many ways to work. They said, you get into a new position. He said, it's new. You learn. And it's terrific. Because any job worthwhile, you're not going to know how to do it immediately. You learn. That's their first year. The second year, you're really getting good. You got it. The third year, you're flying high. You got this. You got this. And then, if you're like me, you get a little bored. You want to do something else. So I took the job. I lasted 6 years because it was an amazing job. I was first director of Hispanic Affairs, and after my sister was no longer vice chair, I was director of constituent coordination. I worked people to work with Asians, African Americans, the disabled community, farmers. It was a great experience. I stayed there so long because I had the life expectancy. It's such a strenuous job. The life expectancy of a staff of the work it was 18 months. It was so stressful. So I was able to, because my sister was there and for most of the time, so she protected me. I was able to do the work I had to do, and it was amazing work. I ran the Hispanic participation at the 1984 convention um, where we nominated Walter Mondale and Geraldine Ferraro was in San Francisco. The chairman at the time was Chuck Manette, and he was terrific. Wherever my sister would come to town and we would go into, we wanted something for the Hispanic caucus or for something, we would go on it. We went into him and we asked him if delegate selection, we wanted to add another Latino at large, okay? And he said, let me tell you, he said, you can do it. He said, you got to understand, you won't always have a chairman from Southern California who knows Latinos. So he was a great chairman. I think he was one of the best. In any case, it was a wonderful convention, the best I think it was. But one of the fun things, and I'm saying this because I think this was very unique at the time. They gave us, I think, 100 passes to the Democratic National Committee every day. You know what we did? We contacted every Latino organization in the country and offered them 2 tickets. And so they were able to come and participate because not a lot of people get to go, and they were honored guest tickets. So that's what we did. So then when I was working there, and I got a call from a woman named Deborah Berger, who was the founder of Project Interchange. And that was a group that it was a nonprofit group. It raised money to send leaders to Israel on a seminar to get to know the country. And we were these Hispanic leaders, Black leaders, women leaders, just later reporters. Those are kind of groups they took. And there were 14 of us. It was a 10-day seminar. And she called me and she invited me, all expenses paid. And I was nervous because we had just bombed Libya 3 weeks before. So I called my sister Polly. Polly's amazing. I hope you get to meet her. And my oldest sister Fernie was amazing too. I mean, I had a lot to live up to, and I know I never did or could. I said, Polly, I said, I'm nervous. I mean, I got invited to this. And she had been on the first Hispanic leader seminar. So Betty, go, because she was a real risk taker. So I said, okay. So here I go. And there were only like 14 of us. And I met JFK Airport, and I'm just so glad to be there. And I accepted partly just because I wouldn't have to make a decision about what I ate, where I slept, what I did, because it was a seminar. They took care of everything. Will Gonzalez, I think was his name, in South Texas. He was an older gentleman of the famous Bonilla clan from Texas. He was, I think that was his name. He was there, and older man, and I knew him. By then I kind of knew the entire activist community of Latinos, and I was happy to see him, and just a plain lovely fellow. And pretty soon this bushy, unkempt guy comes up to us. Hey, are you on the Latino trip? We said, yes. He said, I am too. I'm Alex Rodriguez, Puerto Rican from New York. I knew Puerto Ricans, but I didn't know Puerto Ricans. And I said, I'm Bettie Baca, and I'm Willie Bonilla. I know your brother. I know your sister. First and only time, never have done this before or since. I looked at him. I said, yeah, we're the other ones. And I turned my back on him. Well, he didn't like me one bit. He went off to find a nice woman, another person to talk to because he didn't like me. I didn't like him either, bad, pushy Puerto Rican. But we got to Tel Aviv, and we each had a roommate. And my roommate was a lovely young Latina lawyer. Her name was Sonia Sotomayor. We became fast friends and remained fast friends to this day. I got to know Alex a little better when we went walking, and he was also a single father, and he was talked a lot about his kids. He's a people person. I really got to like him, and we connected. And that's all I can say about that trip. But we connected, and we married 3 years later because he was chairman of the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, another activist. That's all I choose, I guess, in Boston. And I was still working at the Democratic National Committee in D.C., and I was about to take a job as the director of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And his boss, Michael Dukakis, was going to run for president. So I said, if Michael wins, I'm coming to Washington. He said, but if he loses, you have to come to Boston. So I said, okay. We got engaged, but we actually we got engaged, but we didn't marry until 1989. After I had no, we got married in '86 and didn't get married. We got married and forget it. Anyway, we didn't live together, but we would see each other every 2 weeks. One weekend at his house, one weekend at my house, and one weekend at Sonia's house. So we did that for 3 years. And then I went to work for the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, which at that time, I'm still talking 1980s, there were like half a dozen members. And I got the job because Albert Bustamante was the chairman at the time, and the director of the caucus was going to be leaving. And I really didn't like the way I was being treated by the political director at the DNC. So I went to him and I said, I said, I understand Elvira's leaving, or I think that was her name, could I have the job? And he looked at me, he said, yeah, I owe you. Well, it's just because when I worked at the DNC, I would do I would introduce the candidates to fundraisers, and so that was part of my job. And so he was nice. He gave me the job, and it was a great job. I was only there for a couple of years. We did a few things, but the one thing we did do is Congressman Torres, who was dear friend of mine, introduced the legislation to move Congressional Hispanic Week to, or what was it, to Hispanic Month, the celebration, and my staff worked on that and lobbied for that, and it finally got passed. They had tried it before, but it never got passed before, so we were able to stretch Hispanic Week to a full month. So then Michael lost, so I moved to Boston, and once again, Roy Segueda was working as a fellow at the Kennedy School of Government. He got a fellowship or to teach for a semester at the Kennedy School. And so Alex had tried to set me up with other jobs. None of them were very interesting. And he invited us to one of his seminars, and he said, Betty, a lot of Latino kids, and, I'll introduce you. Certainly, we were all the Latino students. They were mostly mid-career, but some in PP. The School of Government had two levels. They had the Master in Public Policy, it was for the younger people, then the Master in Public Administration, which was for the older people who had already done something with their lives and they wanted to come here, and so they were able to do more. Average age of 38. Well, there was a job opening for summer program director and associate director for the mid-career program, and the students lobbied for me, and I got that job. And one of the two best jobs in my life, I loved it. And the other best job was the DNC. Both of those jobs I think I could do forever. I did that did recruiting all over the country, but I recruited from Latino states, Texas and California, and places where we were in abundance, and Puerto Rico. Nobody had ever recruited in Puerto Rico before what I did. And Alex did I tell you I had married Alex? Yeah, he was then, in any case, he was then still commissioner against discrimination, and I was doing Harvard. But so then, was in 1994, Bill Clinton got elected, and we moved back to D.C. So I became executive secretary of the Commerce Department, and he became deputy assistant secretary at the Treasury Department, working with great people at the Treasury Department. Worked at Commerce. Ron Brown was my boss. I was director of the executive secretariat. That's the person that all of the chairman's work and so forth needs to go through my office. In any case, I was working for him when he was killed in the accident in Bosnia, Secretary Ron Brown, and that was pretty rough. But after government, after there, I went to the Small Business Administration as counselor to the administrator, Aida Alvarez. And I have to tell you, it's the first time I worked in government when I went to Commerce and then to SBA, and I always had this not very nice attitude about government. I mean, I worked all over DC, right? I interned here. I felt I knew DC, and I always kind of snubbed the idea of working for the government. I was so wrong. Our government does everything. And I so respect the people who work for the United States government. They do everything, and they do wonderful work. And I learned that at Commerce, and I learned that at SBA. And so I really have to say that in times like this, they really need our support, and we need to give it to them. So I was already getting a little older by that time, and we lost the next election. They kept me on for a while because I was in the senior executive service program. And when that was over, they let me go, and I started, and my husband had a business at the time because he had actually left Treasury to go run for Congress in Boston. So that was a whole other story for us. He didn't win, but it was a great experience. In any case, he had left Treasury, started his own business, and when the Republicans let me go at SBA, I got a contract, or he got a contract to actually give me the work I was already doing at SBA because they did want to keep me. So I did that a few years until I finally retired about 10 years ago. After that, we didn't, I used to wonder how people ever had time to work because we were both so busy all the time with our organizations and activities. Now I'm going on and on, aren't I? You want to talk about Mana some more? Okay, let's go there.
Just really quick, as you have an incredible resume because you've been very involved for decades. I just, again, I want to say that we can do another episode because I don't want to miss this history that's very important, what you've been able to accomplish. And so, which leads me to this question. You're one of the founders, and I consider you the mother of our organization. What do you want your legacy to be?
It's pretty simple. If a legacy is what you leave behind, I want to leave behind the most fabulous, the biggest, the most valuable organization for Latinas ever. I want Mana to last on and on and on and to grow and to change. You have changed so much in 52 years. I can't even imagine. We couldn't imagine at the time what this organization would become. You are so smart. You are so talented. You do so much more than we could ever do. If that's a legacy, I will be proud to carry. And I hope that my granddaughter, my only granddaughter, Sierra Fierro, follows in your footsteps. That's what I would like more than anything.
Well, you said the tone, and I can honestly say, as a Salvadorian native, one of the things I keep sharing, and I am so glad that it's hyphen, it became MANA, shorten it, because it started as Mexican American National Association, and we want to be inclusive. So now we are inclusive. We have from all walks of life, and we also have the non-Latinas trying to join because they see the work that we're doing. And just recently, we want to make sure that we continue giving credit to the founders. So as a national board member, we make sure that in our records, and even now we're revamping our website, we give credit to the Mexican American women that actually funded this organization. So it's all credit, but I'm one that I'm so glad because I'm about inclusivity. And as far as for growth, I see the benefit, and I've talked to you on a personal where I want to see a chapter in every city. I mean, that's what I'm aiming for. That's what I'm manifesting. But it all starts with sharing those stories, right? And one of the things for our 50th anniversary, which we got a chance to see each other in Washington, we have President Biden then invited 100 to join us in the White House. And we were able to celebrate you and the founders that show up. And it was an honor. Like I say that I didn't go alone. I took, you know, literally, but I took the women in my family because that's a big event to be in a place where decisions are being made and the organization is being acknowledged. That wouldn't have happened if it wasn't because you one day with a group of incredible women, brave women, decided, hey, we need a voice. We're going to create this and we're going to have an opportunity to create an organization where we're going to have a voice. And I told you this offsite camera where things are challenging. You mentioned pay inequities. We still have to deal with this. We haven't really made any grounds on that. You said 52 cents a dollar. I said last time I checked was like 54, sometimes it's 47. I've personally have dealt with that myself as a career professional, educated with multiple degrees. I've had to live through this still, right? So that's one of the things that you guys were advocating back then, as well as, women's right to choose, Roe versus Wade, which we still have to put it back into the battle because we lost that battle recently. And so the things that you really were advocating back in the 70s are still that we're still advocating right now. I'm a mother of one daughter. I want to make sure I leave a right place for them where they have an opportunity to make the decision and not decisions are being forced upon them. And I also want to touch back. I am Salvadorian, but I got a chance to go to junior college at East LA College. And East LA College, I graduated with my associate degree. They're really hardcore with the Chicano movement there. I took Chicano studies and I'm not Chicano, but I was like, I was getting school left and right. And it gave me a really sense of Latina pride when I took that class. I think East LA College was a little bit of a reality check. I was trying to blend in to even how I pronounce my last name. Back then it's Calderon, my maiden name. And I would say Calderon. I got checked really quick. My teacher, he's like, you're not Calderon. It is Calderon. You need to pronounce it with an accent. He's like, look at the names on the streets in LA, in California. They're all Spanish names. Don't Americanize them to conform to them. Be honored that the names represent some part of our culture. And that was really like pitiable for me because it kind of set the tone. And I still remember that class, right? And you talk about Chicano studies. And that's what interests me today with what we do here with our organization is going back to our roots, talking about our culture, because we really can't celebrate where we're going if we don't celebrate where we came from. And you're part of that history. That's why it's important for me to showcase your story and archive this moment in time where the new generations, we're producing Latina leaders on a daily basis with our Hermanitas programs, with our mentorship, with our advocacy, with the leadership development. And so when they leave the program and they're out there making the decisions, running boardrooms, I personally want them to know I'm only here because someone decided to do this back then. I don't want the names of the people that paved the way to be lost in time. I want them to be reminded there's a reason why they're there, right? Someone else did the work. We fought the battles. We got rejected. We went through hell and back. And so that's the important the stories that you're telling right now. And I want to say, I'm going to make another episode because I want to know everything. Point A from point B. I have the story when you met Bambi. I met Bambi. When you were roommates with Sotomayor, who's out there making, decisions in the Supreme Court. Those are things that you've been in places that some of us can only imagine. But you have decades of history as a Latina, as a mover and shaker, and one that doesn't stay quiet. We're going to been the pleasure of meeting your husband, who's also, when he's in the room, he's in the room, which is great, right? Because he's all about the Latino movement. And I know he's a Puerto Rican, so I was vibing with him when we last saw each other. Did he ever finish his book, by the way? Was writing his book?
Oh my gosh, Maria, I'm so busy editing that thing. It's so good. It's a history of a Puerto Rican child growing up in Brooklyn and then he's in 50s. It tells such a magnificent story. And it's hard and it's loving. It's a wonderful story. And I've been so busy. I got to get back to editing that. So we can
what
get
about your book? When are you writing your book?
I know, right? I'm pulling together all kinds of Maria. There's so much to do.
Well, you know
There's
what?
so
What you need to do is get someone, we record it, and we have someone to type it. I've been fortunate that through this platform, and just to give content when we have some new audience here, this platform was created because I was actually at a national retreat. I'm going through some heavy stuff, I think God has a plan because we get put in situations. But I'm like, you've been through that, so I'm glad I'm in great company because I think I'm meant to go through all that stuff. Because I advocate, I make sure that people in the room are represented, that feel respected. And this came to message to me the other day where if I'm going to be targeted because I want to make a safe space for women, I'm advocating for equal pay. And I'm opening the doors. I'm just not cracking the door open. I'm blowing the door wide open. Then I'll gladly drive the bus. Like, and so I think that's what it's doing. At the point, I was having a really low moment. It was one of my hermanas at the national retreat that said, Maria, you need to do this influential. You need to do something social media. And she planted the seed. I came back from that conference. I'm like, I've never done this. I'm like, figure out. And here we are. And we have incredible women that have been turning this, sharing stories, and we're creating this platform because these stories need to be told. They need to be shared. I've been fortunate to hear a lot of your stories because you join us in our annual conference at times. And the more I hear, like, the more I want to know. I'm very inquisitive. I'm like, heck, I didn't know this stuff. Why am I learning this now? But it's never too late. So I'm going to create this platform. And this platform has allowed me to interview Latinas who are the first authors. And there's only 8% of Latino authors published. So your book needs to be a really good book that needs to be published because you've been through all the movements. You've been through everything that we've been going through for the past few years just to get us here. And so you have a lot of content that cannot be ignored. So let's videotape you and we'll write it for you. And you can edit your own book. How's that? We create a couple of chapters in here and then you can sit down. Yeah, that's good. And the pictures that you have, Betty, you have archives of content.
I sent you a lot.
Oh my God. I'm like, I was enjoying it. Keep sending me more. I'll make that into a little video clip.
I've got so many more.
I really enjoy that, honestly, on a personal, because hearing your story is more of a reminder for me that, okay, what I'm going through, I'm like, I've been hearing these stories. I'm like, I have nothing to complain. No tengo por qué quejarme because others have had it harder. And in order for us to progress, we have to go through some of these challenges that we have to face. If it's easy, it's nothing's going to happen. If it's hard, then that's where changes happen, right? And so that's where we are in this stage right now. I told you part of the advocacy that we do, which is my number one passion for the organization as well as development. Last weekend was No King's Day. I'm the only one in my family that I'm this vocal. My husband is like, listen, I don't have any bail money. So if you get in trouble, I'm like, I'm not calling you. Don't worry. I know where to call. But at the same token, I'm in my town protesting and I'm connecting with the hermanas in different cities, connecting. And they're like, oh, I was in there too. We have young girls, hermanitas, protesting because he knows that their choice, their voice needs to be heard. And that at 18, I was not aware of none of this stuff, but we're educating our girls at a very young age to say, your voice has power, your vote has power. Let's exercise both. And so that's one of the things that really make me proud. And the fact that you're saying what you're saying that you were doing kind of closes the loop a little bit for me because it's like what the girls are doing, the generations right now. If you go, we're attending Hope. We go to Sacramento. We have interviewing one that actually was an hermanita. She was doing an internship with Governor Gavin Newsom, and she's doing now an internship in Berkeley. And so these are the stories that I love to share because she's like, I'm learning all this through Mana. They're part of Mana de San Diego. So we have speakers, so they get influenced and get motivated. And I get motivated by hearing them like, wow, you're only 22. Wow, you're only 18. Man, I can't believe what they're going to be by the time they're my age because they have a community of Latinas supporting them. And that's part of what you've done. That is part of the legacy.
It's a good legacy, but you all did it. You did. We made the commitment to keep it going, and you are our fruit. You're the result. I couldn't be more proud. I couldn't be more proud.
I am by far at awe, and the things that you are doing, and you've been in a word of comfort in this past few months that I've been talking to you because like there's a reason why this is happening. I'm trying to understand. And then the more I talk to the women, it's like this is why it's happening. Education is very big. So I'm finding a way how I can get more money to put in the organization because the education opens up a community for growth to elevate them. Right? Upward mobility only comes if we invest in our girls. You invest in one Latina, the family and the community benefit. So my work right now is like working with the organization. And it's like, okay, how do we grow it? We have a collegiate chapter, as you met. We have a very productive collegiate chapter. They have 60 members, the East Transburg University of Pennsylvania, and they have hermanos, and they also have
I remember
non-Latinos.
them. They're amazing.
When I'm in a room with all these incredible women, it's like I get like a fuse of energy and motivation. And I'm like, okay, we can literally rule the world with all these incredible women because they're running the companies, they're city officials, but they're not coming to light to make sure that we're highlighting the things that they're doing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
We
so
need to be our own best supporters and promoters. We need to.
yeah, I'm like, so I tell
Absolutely.
them, look, I want to make sure that I set the light for them. Yeah.
So all you need to do is you've already established your own business. All you need to do is get some support, make it a living, right? I mean, you're good at this.
I want
I'm sure
that.
you've been good at everything else you've done, but man, you're good at this.
I really love what I'm doing, Betty, and this is the labor of love for me because it's like I'm putting this, and it's all love. It's like I go to bed really late at night because I'm editing and I'm doing all this like promotion, but it's all you. I send you some of the stuff.
I know.
It doesn't feel
I
like
don't know how
work.
you.
It doesn't feel like work. It's like I'm having a conversation with a friend and a friend that maybe at the beginning I'm a fan and at the end I'm a bigger fan and I'm like, oh my God, I learned so much from them that I just want
How
more.
did you ever find time to work?
Well, now that's another topic, but
Right?
I
Yeah. I
don't,
mean, you worked and now you're doing work,
but
your own work.
yeah, but since being in Mana, it doesn't feel like work for me because even when I was working a lot of hours, On the weekend, I was volunteering. I was being present. I was like, hey, we're gonna have this event. I was showing up. I like to show up to support the women in my circle. That's what we should be doing, clapping for each other. And it was a little joke. It's like, you don't even live in San Diego, but the people I know live in that city. So I'm going to drive. And I also have this protective instinct that was embedded in me and I discovered that since it's a child, because I was always the ones protecting those being bullied. I got into fights. They were not my fights. I got into fights protecting others. And so
You
that was
grew up
what,
there and you grew up there.
so I was born in El Salvador and I grew up in Jersey. And then,
Oh my gosh. Wow.
yeah, that's where I learned English. So I was around the Puerto Ricans, the Cubans growing up.
New Jersey.
West New York, across the bridge.
Okay.
West New York. So that's where I grew up. So I went from a very diverse culture with Dominicans from all cultures.
The East is so different.
Yeah, the East Coast. Oh, it was a little of a shocker when I first came in, and then
Culture shock.
culture shock completely because
Absolutely.
I came to California where in the late '80s there were cholos and the Chicanos but there was a very big sense of Chicano pride when I got here, which is what I was blown away. Over there, you have a big Cuban community, and they're proud of the Cuban community. Here was a different level, right?
I would love to see your podcasts about, women from other countries and because I haven't grown up. I grew up with Mexicans and then Puerto Ricans because of my husband. And I know all about those groups, but I really don't know a lot about the other cultures or the other groups. And I would like to.
Through the organization, I'm very blessed because I have an extended family. I have adopted daughters, and they happen to be Dominican Republicans. I mentor them, and I just tell them, I say, whatever we're doing right now, I say, you're now serving as an inspiration. Listen to their stories because there's Richarmi Batista.
What's your link for all their stories?
I'll share it to you. I'll send it to you right now. So, the first couple of episodes, Richarmi Batista shares her story how she crossed the rivers with her shoes on her hand to go to school, but she was determined to get her education. That young lady right now is working on her master's degree. And she tells a story. So you visualize her little doing that. Leoles Rodriguez is another one. It's Dominican Republic. I have another hermana we're going to be recording. She's Colombian. She's a retired HR director from the Navy. And we're going to be recording her episode soon. We do have a diverse of different cultures. And one of the common grounds for a lot of us that we've been recording, Mana. They've been part of the organization from different chapters. We have Stephanie Gilmore from Metro Detroit. She was the former president of the chapter. She's a mixed race, and she was influenced by her family to advocate. And there were civil rights. I think her father was part of the NAACP, and she's leading still the organization. She's part of the national board. This is what I'm telling you. I love what I'm doing. We have all these nonprofits that we work together. So we connect all our voices. We're going to amplify our voices for the greater good, right? So it's been incredible. Your legacy, we're going to try to continue doing it. You're proud. I'm going to try to do my part because you set the way, and I'm very passionate for what we do because I do see the impact that it's doing. It's a full circle for me being in that environment. So we'll see what that happens, but continue to grow. Continue to grow.
Absolutely. It never stops. Never stops. It's not supposed to.
Exactly. Like I said, we're going to make another, I'm going to follow up with you to do another part 2 because I know I want to hear the other interesting stories and your connections. And I need to hear the pictures you sent me. I need to know more about the stories of those pictures you sent me that I'm going to put in a little collage. So that's another. That's another.
You have a lot to do.
Yes.
You inspire me. You do.
I love you, Betty.
We're retired and my husband and I are taking care of one another at, we're in our 80s and our spirits grow and our bodies are not quite what they used to be. So you inspire me as well. I've always felt that we don't ever stop being productive. We don't ever stop because that's what life is. We're here to do good. We're here to do better. And I hope that we have. I know that through Mana, so many have.
Definitely. So one of a couple of questions I always ask our guests, and like I mentioned, the Inner Niña platform started because no matter how old we get, no matter what walk of life we have, there's a little inner niña inside of all of us, longing to be held, longing to be healed, longing to be loved. So no matter where that part out is, this is what the platform created, and so we're also creating an opportunity to share the wisdom with each other and also for those that are coming behind us, right? And if you had a word of wisdom to share with our audience and for those that are watching and listening, what words of wisdom would you share?
Embrace your fears, do what you believe in, make mistakes, learn from mistakes, then do it again. Look in that wonderful person that's looking back at you from the mirror and tell her you will do it.
Great wisdom. And no matter, again, no matter how old we get, there's a little inner niña. If you had a chance to go back to talk to little feisty little Betty,
Wow. Yeah.
what would you tell her?
It would be hard because she was feisty and life pulled her inside a little bit. I would say let the feisty come out. It's okay to be afraid, but embrace that fear. But don't let it stop you. It still stops me, Maria. It was so ingrained. But every once in a while, the little feisty Nina, she's here. She's here more than she's not. But I work on that every day, to embrace one's fears and to go ahead and do it and don't worry about the mistakes because that's the way that great people are made. That's the way great things happen.
That's very important to know that. And one of the things we talk about in the episode is because we have a different background and also our culture has almost kind of encouraged us, not in a good way, to be submissive, to dim our light, to stop being who we are. So one of the things we're advocating is to be authentic, to be ourselves. And that's one of the things in many of the episodes we're talking about is have our hoops, was that identity for most of us Latinas, our bright colors. I went many years where I couldn't. I could only do this on the weekend when I'm not at work. We're embracing ourselves as who we are. So we're trying to change that for our girls, for them to feel comfortable in their skin, to be authentic, to have a voice, and not to dim their lights for no one. And so it's unfortunate, but I'm glad that the little feisty Betty from back then is the feisty Betty that created this platform for us because this, believe it or not, would not exist. This platform, Inner Niña platform, would not exist if I wasn't part of that group that my friend, my hermana, who said, you need to do this. Now, give her credit because my hermana Martha Cardenas Singh, she's also part of National from our Imperial Valley chapter. She's the one that did it. None of this would have happened if it wasn't because I'm part of this wonderful community and hermandad. So I thank you for that. I also want to, before we close, one of the things we're also passionate about, and you mentioned that to me, is we need to break the glass ceiling, right?
Lots of glass ceilings are just waiting for us.
Um,
We will break them. We will be president.
I hope so. We have a lot to change. There's a lot of things that are happening, but we can't stop now.
Are other people doing podcasts like you're doing? Are other Latinas? Have you found that other people are doing this?
There are a lot of Latina podcasts, but they're different.
I think you could be anything, but I want you to be who you are. I want you to build this network as a business and make it profit. That's what I want for you. You're doing this. I don't know anybody else for this purpose. I mean, with total respect for people that are doing it for other purposes, that's what I want you to do.
A lot of stuff. Look, I'm energized. There's a lot of things that we're working on right now. And this just creates another level of energy for me, which is what I'm loving. It's a labor of love for me.
Thank
Well,
you.
I
for
want to
having
thank
me.
you for your time and for joining us today and telling you your story. I really am so grateful to have you. And I'm gonna set up another episode just so you know, so we continue that conversation. To our listeners, thank you for listening and for holding space for me. I am Maria Benitez, and this is our journey together. Until next time, thank you. God bless.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for holding space for me. And thank you for allowing me to walk beside you as you heal your inner niña. Until next time, please don't forget to follow and subscribe.